All right, so today let's couple of things. I think it was last week. Remember, 4 times during the semester, I take a sample of what percentage of coursework on Blackboard you have completed. Some of you are quite behind. Some of you are moderately behind. Some of you are really well caught up. I saw some of you have gotten a little bit progressively behind. So for example, like the first time I checked way back in like week 3 or 4, maybe you had done 90% of the coursework. The second time I checked, it maybe dropped down to 70. And now maybe you dropped down to 50, which means you're getting behind. Don't let that happen. You're going to get a composite grade of how successful you were at keeping up with the coursework. So there's going to be one more sampling. Everyone should be at 100% at that time, or at least close to it. If you're like way down in the doldrums at 30% by that last sampling, that's not good. You really shouldn't expect to be able to complete a 14-week class in the last remaining weeks of a semester. I understand that it can be that you get a little bit behind here and there, so there's some wiggle room there. But really, if you're like, even if you have 50% of the class to complete and only 2 weeks to complete it, the sad truth is it's not really going to happen for you. You probably won't get a passing grade. It's going to reflect both in the amount of work you've done and the quality of work. There's just no real way to learn those concepts solidly. And that's going to reflect and show in your Blackboard performance and in your testing performance, your course packets. So, you're going to have to start making some decisions about, are you going to be able to get to the end of the finish line for this semester? If you're really, really far behind in the coursework. If you haven't done really any coursework, you probably want to have an advisement with me and go like, if you're not aware of where the coursework is even at on Blackboard, that's a real issue. Let's have a conversation. I did assign the second course packet. I will look for responses from that. I took a look at the few of them that came in. I saw a few little issues that I'm going to address now. And then remember the course packets. There was one course packet, a second course packet, and then the third one will be the final. These are ones where a lot of the times I have you either testing on Blackboard or I have you submit the assignments just to see that you completed them, but we actually cover them in a self-correct or in class. But the course packets are really your chance to show me you're understanding that material and doing it. So if you haven't done your second course packet, get that into me ASAP. All right, so again, any questions at this point? I'm happy to take them. I feel like I just am talking. Okay. All right, it looks like we're good. All right, so I'm going to put a little, I think you can all see the slides. Yes, there's some slides up here with the staff. I'm going to put a little challenge up here, and I'm going to give you a little bit of a time to do the challenge. We're going to be in the key of F major, and I'm going to give a 4 chord, but I want that 4 chord in in first inversion, which is what the 6 symbolizes, because that's going to be one of the intervals we hear against the bass that's different than in a root position. In a root position, the intervals we hear against the bass is a voice is going to be a 5th above the bass and a 3rd above a bass, and likely the double tone will be an octave or possibly a unison. But when we're in a first inversion chord, although we'll hear something doubled and we'll hear that octave, and even though the first inversion, we will hear one of the tones be a 3rd above the bass, the other one will be a 6th above the bass, not a 5th. And that's what happens when we invert that chord. And I'll point that out again when we do this inversion. But let's go ahead and space this in model B. And we'll do it in both closed and then put it in open position just to, remind ourselves of that technique. Now, so I'm going to give you a little chance to solve this on some staff paper, but I want to note one thing. So of course, you have to figure out what the notes of the 4 chord are in the key of F major. You have to know what note to put in the bass, and you have to know what the open B is and how to put it in close to open. So there's several little steps to this process. Now, here's the issue that I was noticing. I'm just going to take a C major chord, nice and friendly. That's not the chord you'll be working with. But just to kind of show you one of the issues that I saw, and we can now address. When we do a model B in root, I'm going to do 2 chord towers here just to kind of orient us. So we have lots of C major, dense C major through 3 registers. All right. We're going to go for a model B. I think most people are getting that, you know, a model B is going to be the distant, you know, this would be model A, the tenor, there's model B, and therefore that forces that chord in closed position to be that. So notice the distance is model A is always, you know, the tone that's right above the bass. Model B is the next one. Model C is always going to be the octave. And then model D is that one. When you do a first inversion chord, you're still measuring the distance of the tenor voice from the bass. So what I saw people do is they kept, I'll show you, they kept the idea that that was a model A, that was a model B, that was a model C, and that was a model D. And even though they then said, well, that is the bass, therefore model B would be this. But that's not the model B, that's the model A. Because what has to happen is that distance measurement for the 4 standard models has to shift along with the note in the bass that shifted. In other words, once this is the bass, because we're going to do the third of the chord as the bass, so we're in a first inversion, then this is model A, this is model B, this is model C. Again, always the octave for model C, this is model D. So looking at that, model B should be this. And this is where we see the inversion come into play and why we have a 6-3 instead of a 5-3. When we look at the distance between the bass and this note, that's a third. The bass and this note is a fifth. When we look at the distance between the bass and this note, E to G, that's a third. But E to C is a sixth. So that's where you'll see the change. So just think about that for a moment. And I'll take any questions on it. Otherwise, let's go ahead and solve this. I'll give you just a few minutes to go ahead and solve it. And then we'll see, I'll ask the questions, what note is in the tenor, what note is in the bass, and what note is in the soprano. Those are all possible questions I could ask. I could ask what note's in the alto, but given those 3, we'll know pretty clearly. All right, so go ahead. F major, 4/6 chord, model B, both closed and open. I am here to take any questions that you may run into as you do it, but otherwise I'll give you just maybe, I'm going to think 1 minute to figure out the notes of the chord and make a chord tower if you need it, and 2 minutes to figure out what notes in the chord tower for model B. 1 more minute to get it written on the staff. That you shouldn't need more than the 3 minutes. It's not that it's not that hard. All right, go ahead and solve it. Like I said, I'm right here if anyone has questions. All righty, getting down to where we should be finishing up our answers. Here's where we have the 4 chord. So now I know what the notes of the 4 chord are. I make my little chord tower. Of course, you don't need to use the chord tower if you are getting your correct answers by doing it in your head. That's fine. The chord tower is a helpful little tool. But that should be the notes that we come up with. All right, so Jadelyn, make sure that you're ready by your chat feature or your microphone. I'm going to ask you a few questions about putting this 4 chord in first inversion in a model B. And then let's have Andrew Mikulak. I actually haven't heard you pronounce your last name, so I'm actually not quite sure how it's pronounced. I think I always said Mikulak.
It's Mahalik.
Mahalik. All right, thank you. You'll be on deck. So once we ask a few questions of Jadelyn, then we'll be with, you're going to take over from it. All right, Jadelyn, are you there? You can either go in the chat or you can go with the microphone. Let me know soon. Otherwise, I'm going to have to move on and make the assumption that you're not there. So I don't want to spend too much class waiting on dead air time if you're not by the computer. So let me know quickly. Going once, Jadelyn, are you there? Going twice. Just put something in the chat quick. Let me know. All right. So I think Jadelyn is ghosting us in the class, but not at the computer. Unless if that's wrong, I apologize. Send me an email letting me know what went wrong. But right now I'm not able to hear you either through the chat or the microphone, so I can only make that assumption. All right, so Andrew, you're on deck. So what note did you get in the bass?
It would be a D.
It would be the D, exactly. So we're in first inversion. So D is in the bass. Now, for a model B, what voice went in the tenor? I see back. Jadelyn, don't step away like that. You're gonna get yourself into trouble. We'll come back. I assume that you were doing the work, but Jadelyn, I'll get you in the next question. We'll do another one, but let's stay with Andrew. Andrew, what was the answer did you get for what's in the tenor?
It'd be a B flat.
It would be a B flat, exactly. So that would be your model A. That's your model B. That's your model C. That's your model D. And you'll see when I write this, this should be the interval of a sixth. And that'll let you know that you've got a D in the bass, B flat in the tenor. That lets you can see that that's not a fifth. So we know that's not a root position. Model B is very easy to recognize that from. And then therefore, Andrew, what is the note that you had in the alto and the soprano? We'll go ahead and finish it up.
F.
F in the alto, and then
B flat.
B flat. There we go. Ta-da!
Let's go.
Is that what you had?
Yeah.
All right. Excellent. So there we go. Whoops, that's a terrible double bar there. Just trying to separate the examples. I'll just do it there. Got to do it with conviction. So that's what it should look like for a 4 chord in F major in first inversion. And then I'm going to actually write them as quarter notes. It's a little bit cleaner. If we put them in open position, my notepad is being difficult. There we go. If you put them in the first open position, it's just a question of bringing that up, and now there they are. So here's the sound. Yes. No, no, no. Is this wrong? Something's wrong. Who caught it? This is a CAD spacing. Let me show you what you did. I mean, it's a perfectly finely spaced chord, but it's not the Model B. It's the CAD. So let me show you what happened. You went with F in the alto and B flat in the soprano. So do you see what happened? As a result, we don't have the hallmarks of one of our classic spaced chords. The bass is not doubled. The bass is the only one on the D. The double tone is occurring in the upper voices, and in fact, it's formed a CAD sandwich. So it's a very well-balanced chord, but that actually isn't the Model B. So whoop, did anyone go
Yeah.
like?
Yeah, I literally went like, what? Like literally right before you said something, I just made a face. I was like, wait, what? Did I write something?
Yep. Sorry, that'll happen. Sometimes have faith that if your answer, like, I'm pretty sure I did it right, but that doesn't look right. Here is the Model B. So remember, once you get that tenor for a standard Model B, then it's just a question of stacking the rest of those tones directly on top of it to get the closed position. And this is now our standard Model B. Any standard space chord has the following conditions met. All the notes of the triad will be in the upper three voices. We see the B flat, the D, and the F. And the bass will be doubled with one of those tones. In this case, it's doubled with the D. That's going to give us a different balance to the chord, and it's going to look different on here. So here we go. D and then F. So a good deal more closed in its spacing. The CAD is always going to be a little bit more open in its sound. But here's what it would then look like in open position. Open position Model Ds, these are beautiful chords. They really have a nice openness to them, and the closed, they sound a little bit more dense. So that's how we go there. All right, let's try one more. I'm going to give you two this time to do as a class. So, Jadlyn, you'll get a chance to answer our question, and then there'll be another person who'll get a chance to answer one of our questions. So don't wander away. Let's go ahead and do F major. Keep the same key. This will be a 2 chord in first inversion, and we're going to space it 2 different ways. We're going to do a standard Model C closed, and we will do a CAD spacing of the same 2/6 chord. Now, the difference with our CAD spacing is I need to tell you which of the tones we're going to double, because it will not be the third of the chord. We're not going to double the bass. It will either be the root or the fifth. And I'm going to have you double the fifth of the chord. So a couple of things that can go wrong. Not controlling the standard spacing, not recognizing what the CAD is, not doubling the right tone, not having it enclosed, not having the notes of the 2 chord, not being in first inversion. Lots of little details that can go wrong, but that's what we're here for, is to try and make sure that we are able to control those details and start getting a sense of how notes are behaving in a given key and how they're being spaced. All right, so I will give you 5 minutes total for this. If you finish, make sure to come back within the 5-minute mark. It's 10:38 now. 10:38 now, so by 10:43, definitely going to start calling on people. So, do the work, get out some staff paper, and go ahead and see how this goes. Again, I am here to answer questions. If you run into issues while you're working on this, I am right here.
Sorry, Professor. What did you say about the CAD? Was it doubled in the tenor and soprano?
It can actually be doubled anywhere, but that's good to make that distinction. Let's double it in the tenor and the soprano. That's the classic where we find the doublings. It can theoretically exist between soprano and alto, or even more rarely alto and tenor. It's all possible, but the classic is going to be between the soprano and the tenor. So let's do it that way. Then we can all be consistent. So that's a good question. Good clarification. I will orient, make sure, just to make sure people are on the right chord, I'll give you that, so that if people are on the wrong chord, they can like use the time to correct a little bit. We're doing a 2 chord. So that's going to be a G minor chord. That's what we would see in a pop or jazz chart lead sheet, letting the performers know which chord to play. That'll be what your chord tower looks like, but remember, we got to put it in first inversion. So G will not be in the bass. The third of the chord will be in the bass. We know that's going to be, now we know what tone is in the bass. All right, 10:41, you've got just a couple more minutes till we get to 10:43. Oh, Forrest, I see I got your microphone on, but you're breaking up. Were you talking? Yeah, I'm not hearing it. There we go. There's Edelweiss is giving me something to say, read. Forrest, why don't you put your comment in the chat? Because I'm actually I don't know what's happening with the microphone, but it's breaking up. Okay, all right, thanks Edelweiss for letting me know. The other chord is gonna, let me go back. So the other chord they're both 2 chords. So they're using the same notes, same inversion. They're just going to be in different spacings. One is gonna be in our standard Model C spacing. The other is gonna be in a standard CAD spacing. All right, 10:43. Let's see how we did. So Jadlyn, are you there? Do you have the microphone or chat feature? Either or. Okay. Yes, you're here. Excellent. All right. So first question, Jadlyn. We're going to do the 2/6 in Model C. So what note is in the bass voice? Exactly. Now, for it to be a Model C, what note needs to be in the tenor voice? Correct. Excellent. There's the hallmark of Model C. And then what voice will be in the tenor? Or I'm sorry, the alto. Sorry, I know that didn't make any sense. What note will be, yes. And that leaves what note in the soprano? Excellent. So there's your Model C. Again, all the hallmarks of a standard spaced chord. We've got the 3 notes of the chord, the G, the B flat, and the D, all present in the upper voices. The bass is doubled with one of the other voices. That would be a Model A. That would be a Model B. There's the Model C, and that would be Model D. So this is how it will look most likely. This is probably the best choice for the bass. There's the tenor, alto, soprano. You have to be very, very careful. I mean, if you look at the 4/6 chord here, the tenor voice is the same, the alto voice is the same, the soprano voice is just one note different, and of course the bass voice is different. So, you know, it takes a while before you can look at the chord and quickly see, oh wait, that's a 2/6 chord. Until then, you kind of have to go through this process of controlling it and beginning to go like, well, there's a B flat, there's a B flat, there's a D and the G. I recognize that it's not root position because it's not a B flat major chord, recognizing that it's a G minor chord. So you have to kind of be able to go both directions, being able to space it, but then also looking at the music and saying, well, what chord is that? It's a G minor chord. And of course, in jazz terms, this would be a G minor chord / B flat in the bass. That's how they would show that. All right, so we're going back to, and I'll do someone new. So Forrest, let's go ahead and call upon you. You get the CAD. So let's go back to the little chart here. The CAD will not conform to the standard. That's our other way we can space these chords. It's still going to have B flat in the bass. So Forrest, I'm going to ask you in a slightly different way because, and you can use the chat since the microphone was creating some issues. So we're going to have the doubled tone between the tenor and the soprano. And I said the double tone should be the 5th of the chord. So what tone is present? It's actually going to be the 5th of the chord. We could do the root. That's also very common, but we actually can do others. So I actually was going to have it be the 5th. If you doubled the root, make a little correction now in just your concept. If you doubled the root, you would have doubled G in the tenor and the soprano, and it would have looked like that. But I'm having you double the 5th. So which one is it going to be? What note are we going to double? Well, the G is the root. So remember, we're dealing with the G minor chord. So you always have to go back to the root position. The G is the root. The bass is the third. The third is in the bass right now. If we doubled the G's, if we had 2 G's, we'd have 2 G's. So we're going to double the 5th of the chord. So what note are we doubling? I think you mean the D. I think you typed in B, but I think you mean the D. Yes, this guy, the 5th of the chord. There we go. So that's the 5th of the chord is the D. And that means what note is going to be in the alto, the one that's missing. So what note, Forrest, would be in the alto? No, the B flat is in the bass. Let me go ahead and show it. So this is the CAD spacing. Maybe whoops, move that back. The trickier of the two spacings, the CAD. It's also the newer one, so we're a little bit more fresh with it. When we do a CAD spacing, only one, the bass is the only one that's going to have the B flat. No one else is going to double that. The bass gets the B flat alone. So this is what distinguishes the CAD from a standard spacing. No one is doubling the bass. No one's reinforcing the bass. The bass is all alone on the B flat. And that takes care of the 3rd of the chord. So now we have a tenor and alto and soprano, and we're going to have either 2 G's and a D, or in this case, because I asked for the doubled 5th, we're going to have 2 D's. The bass is on B flat. No one else is going to have it. We're going to have 2 D's, and therefore the alto should be on the G. So that's how to orient our brain. Now, I actually have 2 options for how to space this. I can either put the tenor and the bass on, the tenor and the soprano on the D that is closest to the bass and create a, get that tenor really close to the bass. But I could also give a little more distance between the bass and the tenor and do something like that. So I could do it this way. If you think about it, if I do that D, it's going to be very close between the tenor and the bass, very much like a model A. If I do this D, that's going to be a much wider distance between the bass and the tenor, more akin to a model D. Now, neither one of these will be model B as in boy or model D as in dog, because I've got a completely different balance to the chord. It's the alternative doubling that's fairly common alternative doubling, the CAD. So this is the one it would be, and then that saves the G for the alto.
Excuse me, Professor.
Yes.
In my notes, I have that for the CAD, we should be careful not to be more than an octave between two adjacent notes. But wouldn't this put us more than an octave between two adjacent notes? What am I missing?
The rule for the adjacent regards the upper three voices.
Upper three. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. The bass can always go wandering a little bit more. A lot has to do with the acoustic properties of sound and how the bass is usually in a low register, and usually an instrument will be rich in overtones in that way, and we begin to hear hints of the other chord tones. And it's also because as the bass gets further away, the tenor can still hear where it is. If it gets too much more than a model D distance, then the tenor starts feeling a little bit lost and isolated from the bass. But yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Cool. Good question. It's always good to clarify that. So this would look like, here's your two answers. You can have the B flat in the bass, and the way I did it, the D would be in the tenor, that D in the soprano, and the G then in the alto. And that's going to be a nice, it's a very nice open voicing of that chord. If you did it the other way, it would bring that tenor line very, very far down. That would drop the soprano considerably far down and put the alto into ledger line territory. This is fine. Altos generally can go about that low. Sopranos can go just, they can go to the middle C or so if you're working for voices. So this is going to be a little bit more dense in sound. Versus. So you can hear how those register choices, because that's what they are. You're making choices. They affect the character. You're either very much closer to each other in the lower register, or you've got a little more distance between the tenor and the bass, and you're covering a little bit more register as those other voices go a little bit higher. All these choices affect the sound, affect the balance. And then when you're doing voice leading, when you're trying to make smooth connections between chords, it may be that this model, that choice gives you a smoother connection from where you were coming, or it may be that this one is going to give you the smoother connection from where you're coming, or it may be that this one is giving you the smoother choice from where you're coming. So you can't really make these choices until you see the larger picture. Yes, I think, was it Marcos or was it Andy that was commenting?
Oh, I double logged in because I need to step away for a second. Let me just see me on my.
Oh, okay. You've got the echo.
That's so cool.
Feedback loops.
I am really sorry.
Nope, that's okay. Did you have a question, or you were just fixing the double login?
Just fix. Oh, no, I have to double log in because I'm gonna just step away for a second, but I'm gonna be on my phone.
Okay, understood. Now, of course, in pop charts and jazz charts, they would just see, the G minor chord, put B flat in the bass. There would be no indication to a pop or jazz musician which voicing to use. That choice is generally left up to the interpreter, the performer, to make those decisions. Or if you're a jazz pianist or you're working in a pop band and you're trying to do a cover tune, that's going to be your choice to make as a performer. If you're an arranger and you're arranging this for your high school band or your friends, and you get a jazz chart or a pop chart and it shows this chord, it's your choice. It's not going to specify it for you. And this is just how the world of music is. And of course, as a performer, if you're just performing it from the written music, you just need to be aware of how that chord is balanced so that you kind of know how to phrase it and how to work with it. You know, that's a different sound. And you just have to start sensitizing your ear. And of course, you have to learn and play the right notes and have a sense of what kind of chord you're dealing with. All right, so go ahead in the chats, put in the chat. No, I won't do that. Sometimes I like to see, I wanted to get a sense of where people's comfort level is with this skill. So let's just do it this way. If you have any questions about this skill or want to see another example done just to cement things, let me know in the chat. But if you feel good and don't need to see another example, that's fine. You don't need to say anything. We'll move on to the next topic for today, which is seventh chords. But I do want to make sure that if anyone feels like they need maybe one more example. All right, so one more example. Would you like to see a standard space chord or a CAD? Which one is specifically a CAD? All right, let's do a CAD. So like I said, with inversion, yes, we'll do a CAD with inversion. So like I said, with first inversion chords are the tricky ones because the first inversion chords are the ones that we most typically see as 50-50. They'll either use a standard spacing or they'll use a CAD. 50-50 chance. And in fact, when we have a series of first inversion chords, they will alternate between CAD and standard. So for example, if we have something that's like a 4-6 followed by a 2-6, almost always one will be in a standard model B, or, a standard like a model B, and the other will be in the CAD. It could go the other way. You could do the CAD this way in the model B or model C, doesn't matter. But it's unusual that you'll have two standard first inversion chords in a row or two CADs in a row. The voice leading always works better if you're going in a series of first inversions to alternate them. So you do want to have, the CADs kind of learned. Let's do a CAD on a 5 chord, and this will actually give me one more little thing to talk about. Whee! Let's do a 5-6. Now, curious thing about the 5 chord, the 5 chord will almost always be found in a CAD. And I'll say why in a moment, but maybe some of you will figure out why when we are on a 5 chord in first inversion, almost 99% of the time, it's going to be voiced as a CAD. So let's go ahead and do a CAD, and let's do a standard one. Let's double the, we'll do the doubling of the root. So it's not so scary as doubling as the 5th. And we'll do it in this classic CAD sandwich, the soprano and tenor. That's where we're going to find the double tone. Sop, soprano. All right, I'll give you 2 minutes to do it. It's 10:58. Let's go to 11 o'clock. Then I'll show the answer just in the interests of time. You can self-correct. And then I do want to move on to the next topic, which is our 7th chords. So go ahead and spend a couple minutes solving this one. Key is F major, 5-6, CAD, doubled root. And put the doubling in the most standard place we find that, which is the soprano and tenor line. When it's done, it should sound like that. All right, 10:59. Hopefully it won't take you too long to circle the notes in a chord tower. Might take a little bit of extra time to actually write it on the staff. So if you don't get to that far, at least you can check your notes in the chord tower. All right, it's 11 o'clock. So I'll give you just a few more seconds to finish up, or at least get yourself to a point where you feel like you'll be able to understand the answer. Obviously, we're in first inversion, so E will be in the bass. Gonna erase all this. All righty, so you guys can go ahead and self-check. I'm going to actually solve it on the staff without the chord tower and show you a technique for doing that. Like eventually your brain wants to be able to do this just on the staff paper. And ultimately you want to be able to sit down at a piano keyboard and just go, oh, I need a first inversion C major chord. I'll space it this way, you know, as one option, or be like, oh, I'm going to space it this way, you know, and know that you have these different options to space it. Or if you're in the music and you go like, oh yeah, this is a classic way of spacing this. So that's where you want to get to. So, you know, you're gonna, depending on how quickly you develop your musical skills, by, you know, quickly meaning how much practice and work you're gonna put into them. That's really what develops them. But here we go. I know that I'm dealing with the pitches C, E, and G. I know the E is going to be in the bass. And if I choose to be a standard spacing, I'll double that E somewhere. But I'm not going to do a standard spacing. I'm doing the CAD. So I know that the bass is the only one on the E. And I know that I want to have two Cs because I made the decision, the choice to double the root. And I know I'm going to put that in the classic CAD sandwich. The reason it's such a classic is it's very easy for pianists to play a CAD when it's in of a first inversion chord, when it's in this classic CAD sandwich. The right hand is able to take the three notes of the tenor, alto, soprano with no effort. If you go to one of the more unusual doublings, then it's harder for the pianist. They have to break the hands up between tenor and bass and soprano and alto. Can be done, but it's not as convenient for the pianist. So you begin to learn which spacings work well for piano style music, or what we call keyboard style. Again, depending on the goal of why you want to learn keyboard. Or
Sorry, Professor.
Yes.
So wait, I mean, when you're saying about the fifth and CAD, it's not necessarily about the fifth. You're saying just the version of CAD, or are you saying why the fifth is in CAD to begin with?
Well, let me ask a little more. So when you do a CAD, you have this choice of doublings. The bass will be on E, and you can either have two Cs or you could have two Gs. And that choice is going to be up to you based on sound or what chords are around it in terms of smooth connection. Is that what you were referencing?
No, I was referencing something you said earlier about, you know, you're saying that the fifth is that is typically found in a CAD space.
Oh, the 5 chord.
Yeah.
The fifth, the 5.
All right, my bad. The 5 chord. My bad. Yeah.
Yeah, I know there's so many numbers going around that it's actually very, you know, it's very tricky. The 5 chord, Roman numeral 5, yeah. The dominant chord is, if it's in first inversion, it's almost always going to be in a CAD. And we'll explain why in just a minute, but maybe some people have, you know, we'll see if we can figure out why. But yes, this 5/6 is almost always going to be in a CAD. It just works better. And we'll see why in just a moment. So when I think about this chord, I know that the two Cs are going to be in the tenor and the soprano. And so I can see it. And then that means the G is going to go in the alto. So I can easily construct a CAD without using the chord tower. It's just a question of knowing and seeing where that double tone is going, knowing what notes of the chord I'm dealing with. I've got my two C's, I got my E, the G needs to slip in between. Now, what I said about the piano writing, normally in the piano writing, you would see the left hand would take that note, and then the soprano, the tenor, soprano, and alto would all be taken by the right hand and would actually be written like this. It's the same chord. It's just that here I'm spacing it so we see very clearly the four voices. So we can, when we start connecting chords, we want to connect the chords in the four voices. But as for a pianist, this is how we would play it. The right hand takes those upper three notes, and the left hand takes the E. And then if I want to double the bass at the octave just to reinforce the bass, remember, octave doublings don't add a new voice. They don't add new interest, but they can, like a subwoofer, add more volume and depth to the bass voice. And you
That
can
C to C is very hard to play. Like you really have to stretch your entire hand out.
the C, yeah, well, you need to be able to do the octave stretch. But most pianists get comfortable with that unless they have very, very short pinkies, or if they're very, very new to piano as adults, the hand may not have that massive stretch yet. I try to show it. I can stretch, in my left hand, I can stretch from C to the C octave, D, E, and if I try really hard, I can get C to F in one stretch of my left hand, but that's pretty extreme. So the reason why the 5/6.
C to F? Oh my God.
Yes.
Oh my God.
And I actually have a very short pinky, but because I'm a cellist, I've developed a massive stretch. No, I shouldn't have. No, I think it's because I always play piano. I've developed a massive stretch between my thumb and my pinky. So I can get that.
The most I can get is like C to E, and that's like playing on the back of almost like on the front of the piano.
Yeah, I can do C to E very comfortably and put notes in between. My right hand can also stretch that distance. But
I gotta get a hand stretcher.
But that's very rare. Usually a stretch of an octave is about what you can count on for pianists. I think Rachmaninoff was rumored to have a stretch in his hand from C up to the G, an octave plus a fifth.
That is insane.
Yeah, he had massive hands, and it made, if you've ever played Rachmaninoff's music, and he does all these left-handed arpeggios, and you realize when his hand was so big, he didn't have to go nearly to the amount of work that other people have to do, because it's just physically his hand was bigger and was able to, more of those notes just were comfortably within his register.
Hashtag blessed.
Yeah, I think Edelweiss is saying, yes, he did. I think Edelweiss, you probably have played some Rachmaninoff, and so you might be well aware of like, oh my goodness, look at all these notes going by in the left hand. So yeah, physicality is an aspect of music, there's no question. So let's go into this question of, why? Why is the 5 chord in first inversion almost always found in a CAD? And it has to do with the conversation about tendency tones. And we're going to talk more about tendency tones because we are going to get into sevenths. But E is a very strong tendency tone. And I remember when we talked about the names of the scale degrees, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Ti wants to go to do. It wants to be pulled into do. It is called the leading tone because it has this quality of wanting to lead to do. And it doesn't like to have someone else competing for its attention. In other words, when we have T in a chord with that strong tendency, it doesn't want to have another T in the chord that also is like, well, I want to go to do too. It's better to have just one note of the chord on T with that note going, please take me to do. If you have, it's like having two needy, whiny children, both of yelling in your ear that they want to go to the amusement park. It's hard enough dealing with one. Don't have two. And it has to do with balance and performance issues as well, because when musicians independently have two Ts, if like, for example, one person is singing T and maybe one of the other musicians, the violinist has T as well. They both want to inflect T the way they want to inflect it, that pull of T, T, do. So they might place them slightly differently in terms of sound, intonation, and temperament as it's pulled into do. And if you're trying to have two people do that, it's like, oh my God, they can't agree on how to phrase it. So when you're in a CAD, only the bass has to deal with the T. They have the whiny tone that wants to go to do. But if I put this in a standard, let me do it with a bass tenor standard. There's a standard model C. Now I've got two voices. Now on a piano, this won't make any difference because the piano has this equality of sound amongst all the notes. But if you're working with a choir where two different people or two different groups of people are singing two different E's, or you're working with a saxophone quartet and two saxophone players both have that E, you've got two people who are on a tendency tone and it's gonna both want to go to do. And if both go to do, you're going to get parallel octaves, which are not great if you're trying to preserve four voices. So it's not the best choice to have a doubled tendency tone in your chord balance. It creates performance problems. It creates potential issues of losing some interest in your four voices. If you satisfy both desires to go up to F, you're going to get parallel octaves. So not a great choice, particularly knowing that there's a better choice out there. And
Sorry, is that just because is that just E in the seventh, or is that just E in general?
No, E when it's functioning as a leading tone. It's the leading tone. The rule isn't specific to the pitch. It's specific to what note is the leading tone in the scale.
All right, sorry, sorry, I shouldn't say E in the seventh. I should say E in the seven.
Seventh scale degree, as opposed to what we call
Yeah.
the chordal seventh.
Yeah, but then I was wondering too. Okay, so would, like, for example, like C minor, like in the C minor scale,
Mhm.
is it just like the second would be the second be a tendency tone because it's like diminished, or is it just more about the placing?
Short answer, not for our purposes right now. More complex answer, yes. It has a strong, the second scale degree has a strong tendency to want to be pulled into the third scale degree. It's all about where the half step motion is.
Okay, so so it's less about okay, because I was thinking diminished because of the diminished character of the second.
Yes, lay is also a tendency tone that wants to be pulled down a half step into the dominant. So we're talking secondary tendency tones. Wherever there's a half step, that sixth scale degree wants to be pulled into G, you have secondary, in a way, secondary tendencies. But the most important one is if we're in the harmonic minor and we have T to do from the harmonic minor, because of the importance of do and the importance of establishing do and making do feel like the beginning and ending of the scale, it's the T to the do that is the most powerful and therefore problematic of the tendency tones to control. But in essence, when you're dealing with a scale, even if I play a scale, we're going to hear wherever there's a half step motion, there is a strong tendency like feel. Whoops. Mi to fa is a half step, so la ti do. So wherever a half step motion is, the half step is a stronger pull to the next scale degree than the whole step is. So it's just how the dynamics of a scale work.
Okay.
But for purposes of balancing chords, we often think of it as the leading tone. That's the strongest tendency tone and the one that creates the most problems in voice leading or balance if we don't respect it. If that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you.
Alrighty, so at this point of the game, you do want to get comfortable spacing your chords, controlling that spacing in various, according to various instructions, and just being kind of comfortable with the terminology. The next part of the game is to do what Course Packet 2 started to do, which is right now at this point, putting chords in succession based on voicings that I'm giving you and observing, is the result smooth? Is it a good result? Are we controlling the lines, the soprano, alto, and tenor lines? Are they producing a nice smooth effect that work well in counterpoint with the bass? And that's what the last unit was covering, and the last chord packet was starting to get you to think about, is how to make what we call voice leading, how to control the way the voices are leading when we start connecting one chord to another. Now, the addition of sevenths on our chord complicates our spacing concerns, how we balance and space chords, and it also complicates our voice leading concerns. So let's go into just the beginning of what a seventh chord is. I won't have too much time to go into the specifics, so I'll probably put this in to the self-guided unit, more detailed work on seventh chords, but let's get the basic concept. So first of all, I went a little far. Let's just remind ourselves of our basic intervals. And as you go, you want to start getting more and more comfortable with our intervals. And right now we've been talking about generically, like generic sixths, but sixths could be major or minor. I've been talking about the third of the chord. Thirds can be major or minor. Fifths generically are usually perfect, but we know there's also the tritone, which is a diminished fifth. And fourths can be perfect, but they can also be augmented. These are the mutant fifths. And we know that there's a half-step distance corresponding between all of these. So in a minor third, there's 3 half steps. In a major third, there's 4 half steps. In a perfect fourth, it's 5 half steps distance. Counting half steps is something that's good to do just to get your brain around the concept that these intervals are measured in both the half steps and the letters that they span, which is what governs whether they're a fourth or a third or a sixth. But ultimately, you learn your intervals by just working with them and becoming comfortable with which thirds are major, which thirds are minor, which fifths are perfect, which ones are diminished. But I do want to bring your attention to 2 other kind of awkward mutant intervals like the tritone. If we have an interval that spans 3 half steps, but it spans only 2 letters, which is what we will see in a harmonic minor scale, with the distance between lay and T, we get the augmented second, which sounds exactly like a minor third, but on the page, it looks like a misspelled third. It looks like it's still being spelled as a second. We do find it in the harmonic minor scale. And the inversion of that, seconds invert to sevenths and augmenteds invert to diminished. And so we will find a diminished seventh. And I just want to bring your attention to what the diminished seventh is, because it will affect our chords. And if lay to T is an augmented second, if we invert it T to lay, we get a diminished seventh. And the way to think about it is a major seventh is just 1 half step shy of the octave. It is 11 half steps. A minor seventh is 10 half steps. So it's, a little bit, not quite, well, it's not 11 half steps, it's 10, but it's still going to be spelled as a seventh. If I go 1 half step down, I go into the land of the sixths, and I normally change the spelling of the notes so that it conforms to the spelling of a sixth. In other words, C to B is a major seventh, C to B flat, minor seventh, change the spelling to C to A, I'll get a sixth. But if I keep the spelling as a seventh and go down to, it's going to be nasty, B double flat, and we'll talk more about double flats, that's the same as A, we'll get the land of the diminished seventh. So just be aware that some of these mutant intervals you do have to make friends with. The tritone and augmented seconds, AKA diminished seventh. Those are some of the most common mutant interval spellings that you're going to have to deal with.
So sorry. So C augmented C aug 6 would be C, E, G, and you're saying B double flat?
For the diminished seventh, B doubles flat would give you a diminished seventh. Now, you're not going to hear a seventh chord if the triad that you just played is C, E, and G. So we'll get into that. You have to have very specific combinations of specific kinds of triads with specific kinds of sevenths.
Oh, okay. So sorry. It wouldn't be augmented 6 to be diminished 7th. Then you're saying.
Diminished seventh, right.
Okay.
But we normally wouldn't put a diminished seventh on top of a C major triad. It's going to be built on a diminished triad. And then you'll get, I think, what you're looking for, which is the diminished chord. But let's go ahead and get to it.
Sorry.
All right, so the anatomy of a seventh chord. So let's start very, very simply. At its most basic, a seventh chord is just when you build an additional third is added on top of the triad, which will create a distance of a seventh between the root and the top chord tone. So let me show you what that means. Let's just take, for example, an F major triad. So there's F major. I actually wrote it up here. Now, if I add an additional third on top of that, that would be the note E. And notice that did not get me to the octave, F, A, C, E. So I have 4 distinct tones in that chord, all a third away. This is known as tertian harmony when we're stacking thirds. And if you recall, for those who took theory 1, we have, harmony can work by stacking any kind of like interval on top of each other. We could have quintal harmony by stacking fifths. We have quartal harmony by stacking fourths. Secundal harmony by stacking seconds, but it's just going to sound very dense. But if we stack thirds, we get tertian harmony, and our ears and brains process that harmony very, very quickly. So we like tertian harmony. So this is just what we sometimes call extended harmony. We're extending the harmony beyond the basic triad. Now, when we do that, we're going to have a quality to the seventh chord is determined by 2 factors. The quality, and I'm going to write it this way. And this is the first concept to understand about how we talk about seventh chords. We talk about it based on the quality of the triad, which in this case is major. And then we describe it based on the quality of the seventh. And in this case, the distance between F and E is 11 half steps. That makes a major seventh. And so this is what we would call an F major, major seventh chord. The first big M refers to the quality of the triad. The second M refers to the quality of the seventh. And that's how we categorize it. And that's a very helpful way of hearing what a seventh chord is. It is a F, in this case, F major triad with an F, E major seventh built upon it. So even though we're hearing it as stacks of thirds, we conceptually think of it as a triad and the distance of the seventh. Now, here are our possible combinations that we can have. We don't often build triads off of an augmented chord for reasons I don't want to go into, but our ear cannot perceive it really as a seventh chord because of the intervallic fingerprint that that chord creates won't sound like a stack of thirds to our brain. So we don't usually have use the augmented triad as the foundation of one of our seventh chords. Our brain can't process it as a seventh chord. That's the short answer. So the only ones we can really process as tertian harmony, stacks of thirds, are major, minor, and diminished triads as forming our base, and then only certain combinations of the major, minor, and diminished sevenths can be combined where our brain recognizes that it's a stack of thirds. So not every combination works. But I'll show you what the main combinations are. We can have a major triad and a major seventh will give us a major seventh chord. That's one combination that works. Major seventh chord. We can have a major triad and a minor seventh. If F to E is a minor seventh, F to E flat is a minor seventh. So there the triad is still F major, FAC, because again, I'm always thinking about it in terms of the bass triad. And now the quality of the seventh is minor. So that's a major minor seventh. That's one of our other seventh chords. Major, 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 minor. If we change the quality of the seventh chord to minor, notice I changed the bass triad to an F minor chord. I can put an E natural on top of that, and then the bass triad is minor, but the seventh is major. So we can have a minor major seventh chord. That's always the surprise chord. Like, it was the butler who did it. It suddenly sounds like shocking. Ah, minor triad, major seventh. It's the most shocking of those particular seventh chords. And I can have a minor triad and a minor seventh. And then we have a minor seventh chord. I believe that is, for me, that is the most beautiful of the seventh chords. I love minor seventh chords. Minor chord, triad, minor seventh. Now, those are the only four combinations that use a major and a minor triad. Because we're run out of time, I will save the diminished triads, the ones we can build on a diminished triad, for next, or for these, I'll cover them in the self-guided. But go ahead and listen to these four quality of triads: the major, 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 minor, minor, major, minor, minor. They're beautiful. Major, 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 minor, minor, major, minor, minor.
You can just go between those. Sounds great.
You do, yes, exactly. They're all beautiful. See, there's the minor, minor. Love it. Now, when we space these, the big thing to remember is that instead of 3 tones and 4 voices, we have 4 voices and 4 voices and 4 tones. So we don't have to double things. Everybody can have their own note of the chord, but that doesn't mean we can't double something. So that just saves the ones we can build on a diminished triad, and there's 2 of them. We'll save them for the self-guided tour, but this is a little introduction to seventh chords. And like I said, the way to really approach it is to recognize that we're doing it based on the quality of the triads, in this case major, and then the kind of seventh that is measured. And even though this is a stacked third, we don't often talk about the quality of that third. We could, but it's not how we categorize it. We don't think of it as a major triad with a major third built on top of it, C to E. We think of it as a major triad, FAC, and the distance between the root and the seventh of the chord is major. And likewise down here, the last one would be a bass minor triad with the minor seventh on top. So you do have to start becoming comfortable knowing the quality of your sevenths. Well, give a few little tricks to thinking about what is a major versus a minor seventh. There's ways of thinking about it that can help, but that's the way to really think of it. Last thing before I know we're a little bit out of time, I'm going to put all of these sevenths in a triangle just for purposes of keeping our eye on it, because that tone is dissonant. And when we add a seventh to any chord, sevenths are one of our dissonant intervals, and it changes the stability of a triad that's major, which is nice and stable, to a sound that now shimmers and feels unstable because of that dissonant seventh. And we can either treat that shimmering quality of dissonance as just a color to add shimmering qualities of dissonance to our chord, or we can treat it as something that we say has a function. It's a dissonance that needs to be resolved. And when it resolves, it produces a musical effect that feels like tension release. Ah. So depending on how we conceive of this chord, we can either think of it as just a beautiful chord of color and treat it as such, or we can think of it as a chord that has tension that needs resolution. Both are totally valid ways of using seventh chords for color and for tension release purposes. And different styles do it differently.
Professor, can I just plug an event real quick?
Sure. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Guys, I'm part of the music club for QCC, and we have a talent show on Friday. I'm actually the president, and I'm running a little low on contestants right now. There are 3 prizes. There's a Bluetooth headphones, Bluetooth microphone, and a Bluetooth speaker, all up for grabs if you guys place in the top 3. But if you guys want to show off a talent, or just be part, or just show up, just email me at my Outlook email, and you just send me a submission with your performance, and it can be digital or you can do a live audition this Wednesday. But it's a really good opportunity to show off your skills and just be, part of the greater QCC community.
Absolutely. And I am looking, my goal is to get that email out to all our MP and MUS students that you sent me, Marcos, but apparently we don't have it's not set up to do that yet for some reason. So we're working on that. So hopefully that announcement will go out to all of our MP and MUS students.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem. All right, so we are a little bit past time, 11:31. I'm happy to stay on the line and take any questions. Otherwise, you all may go. Thanks for the class. Make sure you start getting yourself caught up in Blackboard. And if you haven't done course packet 2 yet, go ahead and do that. Send me the results. And I will see you all next Monday.